Having that
Yes.
Kate can easily step into. So we'll have to wait and see when that happens. All right. Well, now it is time to break down the royal rules. And this is obviously a story that we've been following for the past couple of weeks, Prince Harry's security issues. So to help us do that is security expert Robert Aitch. He is director of operations for Mobius International Security. He's going to break down Harry's security situation and why he doesn't think he will be heading home anytime soon. Take a look. All right, so let's kind of break down, if you can help me break down this legal dispute between the British government over the decision not to let Prince Harry pay for police protection. So what does this mean?
The UK government has got a very difficult situation on their hands insofar as many questions need to be answered. Due to the unprecedented situation with Harry, there is no manual or template to work from. Members of the Home Office, Police Protection Command, and also palace officials come together as a form of committee, which is called the Royal and VIP Executive Committee. And this committee decides on who receives protection by the police, and if they do receive it, what capacity does that appear? So when Harry was relinquished his royal duties, he goes over to the States. That move in itself compounds greatly on the question of whether he receives ongoing police protection or not. Now, what the UK government has decided to do is to remove protection, or what it appears to be, is to remove his protection in its entirety. And what I mean by that is, I don't just solely mean by the personal protection officers that he normally has, but the full scope of the protective effort as a whole. By virtue of the fact he is a senior member of the royal family, he is exposed to a wide variety of serious threats, and the risks to those threats are have increased since his departure from the royal family. The fact he no longer receives police protection, his risk to threats have certainly spiked. Now, when you make a comparison between Prince Harry and other members of the royal family who don't receive protection, here you have Harry, who has served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He is a very high-profile member of the royal family, and he is somewhat developed a band of people who would take offence to his actions from departing the royal family and moving over to the States. So all of this collective actions have resulted in an increased risk to those threats that were already present. So cost alone shouldn't be based solely on the fact of his role within the family and the taxpayer funded for that service. Besides the fact that Harry has now removed that argument in its entirety, he's offered to pay police protection. So the UK government can't turn around and say the UK taxpayer isn't actually now going to fund this because you're no longer providing a service to the people. Harry is offered to pay for it in its entirety. So when you're to make a comparison between the private sector in the UK and that of the government-led provision, there is no comparison whatsoever. And we're not just discussing the differences between manpower from a government police protection provision and that of the private sector. If Harry came over to the UK and he received private sector only security, that security is compounded by not only the lack of competence and performance on the ground generally by those individuals, but also the fact that you don't have the usual intelligence flows. But on top of that, which is probably the most influential aspect over all of them, is the fact that they don't have the law on their side. So police provision of protection to someone in the UK, because they have the power of the law, they can create sterile and secure areas. They can prevent access by the civilians on the ground at venues. They can control traffic flow, and they can go whatever speed they like. They can stop traffic. I mean, just this in itself reduces the risk to threat quite considerably.
Could the royal family, could they step in and say, can they trump that and say, we want to give him police protection? Can they do that or not?
I don't know the social political process here. The royal family can, of course, express a grave concern over his security, which could influence the outcome of decision-making process with the committee. There are palace officials involved in any decision-making process that they conduct, and no doubt it is influenced. But this influence, of course, I think there is, admittedly, there is an undercurrent of a political frustration with the situation, and the reaction seems to appear to be more of spite and rebuke than it is of actually focusing on threat. I mean, when we sit here and we're discussing possible worst case scenarios that could happen to Harry and Meghan, I dread to hear the outcome of a conversation that is to be had in who decided what. And of course, at the end of the day, these decisions, they're not taken lightly by the committee, and it's a collective decision. So not one person's head would be scrutinized in the decision-making process. The whole collective would be. But nonetheless, there will still be questions to be answered if something did occur.
Yeah.
And of course, there is an element of duty of care that I'm surprised hasn't actually been undertaken. It's been a complete wash of their hands. At the end of the day, their outlook is Harry has decided to relinquish his royal duties. He's decided to go over to the States. He can then decide to have his own private security. And this is a huge error, I believe, on part of any duty of care, on part of any focus on the threats and Harry's risks to those threats.
Now that he's made this public and released a statement about it, do you think that this petition will be reversed and he will get the police protection that he needs?
Absolutely not. No, I don't believe the Home Office will back down whatsoever. Because if they did, that in itself would set a precedent for future legal actions against them. They have to be committed now to their decision. It's a very difficult situation they've had. They've taken one route that I wouldn't have. But of course, they are privy to far much more decision-making processes than I am. But yet again, I'm sat here purely focusing on the threat and risk to a former member of the royal family, or rather a former member of royal duties, who will always be a member of the royal family, who has gone from a huge amount of police protection to none at all. The private sector can do their best. Now, we only employ former government protection officers. We can have someone who's provided protection to the Prime Minister on a Monday, working for us on a Tuesday, and likewise for the royal family. So the standard is there on the ground, but they still won't have the powers of the law on their side. It's not just about the caliber of the individual, even though that is huge, because much to do with close protection is planning and preparation. But it's a huge aspect of police provision where they have the laws on their side that make all the difference, not to mention the intelligence.
Yeah, it's so interesting that like he broke this down, and basically like even though you can hire private security, they don't have the same responsibilities. They don't have the same roles as police protection. So they can't tell people what to do. So he's literally just kind of walking around, without any protection pretty much. And now that he's made it public, Richard said he doesn't think that Harry's going to get the protection that he wants. So who knows if he's really even going to be able to come home.
I know it's such a difficult situation, I think, for Harry, for his wife and his children, but also his family as a whole. I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out, because it's such a difficult decision to make. But again, ultimately, Harry's got to take care of his family.
100%. And he said, even though he's not a member of the royal family anymore, we kind of talked about this last week, even though he's not a member of the royal family, he's still like one of the most recognized members of the royal family. He's still a senior member. So he should be giving this protection. It's really a difficult situation, but we'll see what happens.
It really is. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we wrap